All right, I wanted to talk about a subject that's very dear to my heart. Um, what I wanted to get across the point about my channel and what I'm trying to do here. I'm not trying to debunk JW Doctrine. There's enough other people doing that. I'm not trying to be the next MBTI guru trying to help people. There's enough people doing that. I don't give a shit about those two things. What I made this channel for is to combine my interests and my own anecdotal evidence of what I've done myself personally and how people can grow to be a healthy, functioning person and different things that I've learned, I know firsthand, that work. And that is the whole point of me. As an ENTP, my job is to relay the truth, whether how hurtful that is, and to help other people. All right, that is literally the whole purpose of my existence. I don't have much interest in much many things because ENTPs are kind of like robots when it comes to interest. All right, so finding out why people do things is very hard for us to do because we don't understand most things in culture. But we do understand systems, processes, and fixing issues and telling the truth, cold hard truth. All right, and so let me give you a little story. And in my hour and a half long I don't autobiography video, I mentioned my bouts with anxiety. Okay, so this is going to be a testimonial about the Linden Method. The Linden Method is a therapy program that I use to eliminate my anxiety and my major depression I had. I've been anxiety free for 9 years now. Okay, and I mean free. Like you almost lose the ability to be afraid. It's quite amazing. I mean, it literally transforms your life and it completely changes you as a person. Because most people, I mean, day to day life, most people live by fear, die by fear, and everything about their life is about fear. A lot of this has to do with a lot of things they see and what they put inside their mind and their input and the influences in their lives. There's also a lot of gut issues and health issues, but I'm not addressing that right now. What I'm just talking about is just a simple therapy program that all people can do, and it's very affordable. I mean, talking to a therapist, from my experience and from people I've spoken with, I mean, I have friends that have been in therapy 5, 10 years who still have anxiety problems and they're never going to get over it. You have to understand there's a business to this. The business side is to keep you anxious and to keep you coming back talking to that therapist. Whether or not you want to believe that or not, I don't really care. Let me tell you how this works. The Linden Method is, I believe, less than $200 for one step process, and they give you like a year support or something like that. I didn't have to use the support line. I didn't call them one time. It was pretty self-explanatory. Granted, as an ENTP, reading systems is very easy for me, and figuring things out is also very easy. So I've have given this to other people who had a hard time processing it, so that is a possibility. But this is a great process. To give you a little story about my anxiety issues, when I was inactive off and on for about 5 years as a Jehovah's Witness, and then I came back, and well, essentially when I came back, I was essentially treated like shit, which isn't shocking for most people's stories. I came back and my elders were asking me about my personal life and different things like that, and I told them that I told them I was bisexual. That was my words. What I said. I'm really gay. I'm not bisexual, but I told them this, and then I was pretty much treated like a pedophile in the congregation in the Kingdom Hall, and I wasn't allowed to be around like people my own age on one-on-one occasions because I might influence them with my gayness, and and most people would think, why would you put up with this shit? Well, because I was brainwashed in the cult and I was born in it. Okay, so sorry, I didn't break free till late recently. Well, anyways, so that happened, and then I spent like a year, and I was in Tennessee, and I was kind of broke. I was stuck in a state I didn't like, and I wasn't really going anywhere. I was just playing video games a lot, which is typical of ENTPs in their early 20s to mid 20s. Just stagnant and afraid to do anything else because you're afraid of trying new things. And well, anyways, at an assembly, I think it was Keep on the Watch assembly, and they were talking about the five snares of Satan or something like that. And so I was like applying it to myself because I was really into organic food at the time, and I was vegan, and so I was thinking to myself, well, if I can do things that well, why can't I do the Jehovah's Witness thing well? And so After that assembly, I spoke to the elders right away, and I told them, "Hey, I want to start. I want to pioneer." Okay, and they told me I had no restrictions whatsoever, no restrictions. And so my hours went from like 5 hours a month to 70, like instantly. And that's just, I just dive stuff right in when I do things. And I turned in my auxiliary application, and they declined it. Okay, I turned in another one that declined it, and I wanted to start pioneering in September. The assembly was in June, so July, August both declined, and then they pulled me in the back room and tell me that they're not going to let me regular pioneer, and they were really, I don't want to use the word mean, but I didn't feel respected. I didn't feel like they were taking me seriously. One elder did take me seriously, and he was a really dear friend of mine. He's an ISFP, and but the two ISTJ elders were being jackasses, and they were testing me. And so, well, anyway, so I just kept pioneering. So I kept getting my 70 hours anyways without being an auxiliary pioneer. And I was trying to figure out what was wrong because they weren't giving me any information. And I like to figure out processes and figure out things and why it was happening. And I couldn't find any answers. And so I was like kind of like brainstorming all the Watchtower literature until I stumbled across one about being rebaptized. And it kind of hit me over the head like a ton of bricks because I was like, well, I was technically fornicating when I got baptized. And so my baptism was invalid. And so I brought this before the elders, and he insisted that that was not the case because I had so much spiritual growth and I was such a good example, and the Holy Spirit was clearly with me, and so I didn't need to be rebaptized. And so to answer the question, he just pretty much told me, Jehovah's with me. I have nothing against me. The elders don't like me. Is essentially what he told me. He didn't say that way. I had to figure out on my own. And so uh, I was really, really already dealing with a lot of paranoia and stuff like that because I also quit Final Fantasy 11 after 5 years of playing it cold turkey. And that's not really good. People don't realize the video games are highly addictive and they really screw with your dopamine levels. And so you can't just quit MMORPGs cold turkey if you're really, really into it, especially for a long period of time because it make you freak out. Well, anyways, long story short, I developed general anxiety disorder in a very, very extreme degree. Um, it got so bad that I would have panic attacks at night where I woke up with bruises on my body from like shaking and striking myself and things like that. I When I went to church to Kingdom Hall, I wasn't able to sit next to people because anybody next to me was nervous, made me really nervous, and I just developed really, really bad social anxiety. It was getting to the point now where I was getting kind of agoraphobic, and I was only able to shop in grocery stores when there's nobody was in there. Um, I used to hide behind the counter at the Kingdom Hall so I could avoid people because I had these images in my head of like strangling children and hitting people over the head and just really violent things, which is very common for men to get. When you mix the adrenaline rush of an anxiety problem with testosterone, it can be very aggressive and violent. And so I felt that I was a threat and a danger to people around me, and so I avoided people even more. Um, there was points where my anxiety was so bad, my depression was so bad that I had an out of body experience where you kind of your brain creates this scenario where you're outside your body looking at your body inside bed. It's quite crazy to think about. Things like that. And I went to, after another assembly, this is even after they approved me for pioneering 5 months later. Wait, no, actually 7 months later, sorry. And it was kind of weird. Like I wasn't able to pass mics. I wasn't able to auxiliary pioneer until that December, and then they allowed me regular pioneer in February. And right after that, all of a sudden I had like mics, sound, stage, and like everything all at once. And so I had all these things, and then I was like, they're asking me to give talks, and I was freaking anxious mess by then. Just like total basket case. Um, More so than I was already because I also had a lot of blood sugar issues, but I'm not going to get into that right now. And so I fixed those also with help of longevity and naturopathy, but that's a different subject for me. But so I had a lot of different issues, and dealing with spiritual turmoil, and a lot of people don't understand the amount of pressure you get as a Jehovah's Witness, and then especially as a regular pioneer. It's quite crazy, especially as a male pioneer. Um, and so a silly part told me go see a doctor, and so I was like, I was doing it in a natural way. I was taking 5-HTP and SAMe, which was working, but it was costing me about $80 to $100 a month. And essentially, what that does is it kind of just calms you down and makes you go to sleep really a lot. It wasn't as bad as the drugs when I got on Celexa. After I went and saw a doctor and I got diagnosed with major depression, general anxiety disorder, and a lot of different other things. Now, he recommended me going to see a talk therapist, but Jehovah's Witnesses view that as a faux pas and just something no, no, not to do, because you're going to listen to some expert pretty much talk you out of your faith is what they're afraid of, because they're going to be like, well, yeah, we figured out what your anxiety is coming from. It's from the high control group you're in, and so if you want to get rid of these problems, you need to get out of the high control group. That's typically what a therapist is going to go with. And so that's why the witnesses don't really do that. And so I got on Celexa, which essentially turned me into a zombie. Okay, and it wasn't until I got on Celexa that I started having suicidal thoughts as well. Where when I explain suicide, I've actually helped a lot of people who've dealt with family members who have committed suicide. And you need to understand that it was with suicide is essentially like another. It's like a life threatening disease. You get a if you have a family member or a loved one that committed suicide, kind of just in your mind think of it as cancer. Because it is essentially emotional cancer that's eating away at you. And when you're in that mode, it's not really you as a person. It's like a foreign object that overtook your brain, and all of a sudden you're doing stuff that you really would never do. It's very hard to explain unless you've dealt with depression and anxiety itself. Well, anyways, and so I would post a lot of emo stuff, emotional, anxious stuff on Facebook, and I eventually actually got counseled by elders over it. And they dragged me in the back room and said that we can't recommend you as a ministerial servant in the future if you continue to speak negatively. Okay, and so this crap was all piling up, and then like I spent a couple texts talking about suicidal thoughts to a few elders, and they never responded. Okay, and so you're kind of on your own. My parents were useless. They were like, it's just in your head. And they're like, one day you're gonna realize to just put this behind you and everything's gonna be fine. Like I was not fine. Yeah, literally, I was writing suicide notes and I was just a real fucked up mess. Eventually, though, somebody saw my post on Facebook. An elder I didn't speak with for a long, long time. I knew him back in Napa, and he recommended the Linden Method to me. And he explained to me about the amygdala and other stuff. And I thought it was absolute bullshit, but at that point, I already accepted I had a terminal illness, and so I said, "What do I have to lose?" So I ordered it. I think it was like $170 or something like that, and I got all the CDs and the book and all this other stuff. And it's an amazing program because it's so simple, so systematic, and in some ways you go into it and you kind of feel stupid because you it goes by the step-by-step process of how you got yourself in that mess in the first place. And that's the great thing about it, because it really teaches you that you're not experiencing symptoms, because symptoms is a sign of an illness. You're not sick, you have sensations. So sensations are feelings that you create. And so if you create these feelings and you create these sensations that you assume are real, that means you can stop doing it. Okay? And so essentially the system behind it essentially like unlearning how to ride a bike, because with each thing we do in our minds, we create a new memory or a new usage of our brain, and like little tubes, and then when you stop using them, they kind of regress until your brain essentially sits to the side and has it as no longer as a useful function. And so you have to reverse the stimuli and do alternate behavior, because you literally trained it. That's why it's a behavioral condition or a behavioral illness or whatever you want to call it. And so it's behavior that you train. So you got to untrain the behavior. And so the Linden method was a really, really amazing process. Anxiety free. I really dove into it, and like I said, I process things very easily. And as soon as I can figure out the system, I'm going to do it. Okay. Other people may be a little bit different. They may need a little bit more emotional support. But within a month, I was anxiety free. I no longer had panic attacks. I no longer had the visions in my head about cars hitting me and crashing and all this weird crap that could happen. That paranoia. I was able to go on stage, give talks. Um, I was able to do pretty much everything anxious. Now, granted, when you cause a chemical imbalance via anxiety, that depression will come and go as your brain chemistry rebalances, and so the depression probably lasted off and on for about a year after that. But the anxiety itself, there's two different things. Anxiety and depression are not the same thing. Okay, so the anxiety went away first, and the depression kind of lingered on for about a year, and then it's eventually gone. I don't deal with chemical depression anymore or anything like that. I don't have suicidal thoughts. And my fear now is completely all natural fear. Like I could be afraid of something like a tiger in the room. That's real danger. So your fight or flight mechanism will kick in appropriately. But what a person with an anxiety problem is kind of like you have that switch that turns on fight or flight. So a person with like general anxiety, imagine it being like pushed up and then broken, and it's always on. Okay, that's the problem. So you got to untrain yourself to do that. And the Linden Method is a step-by-step process. It's an amazing program. I highly recommend it to all Jehovah's Witnesses, XJWs, and essentially anybody, because most people I talk to have anxiety problems. And whether this be phobias, general anxiety disorder, panic attacks, uh, OCD, all these things are all in essentially the same disease. It's just you manifest it in different ways. Essentially, it's all been trained via amygdala, and that's the problem. I will give a disclaimer for it. When you finish it and you get rid of your anxiety, um, it kind of it does isolate you in a little bit because you're not like everyone else who is anxious. And so you can't really watch I can't watch horror movies anymore, and I used to love them because movies don't scare me because it's irrational fear. It's a movie. It's not a real fear. And so you just watch the film and you're just like, eh, and nothing really happens. I used to be really, really into rock climbing. I even have the damaged tendons to prove it, you know. Uh, and so it ruined rock climbing for me because I was no longer afraid of heights. I was no longer afraid of falling. Then I can literally process and deduce rock climbing in a logical, rational way because I'd be like, okay, this rope is designed to hold anvils. This is stainless steel bolted into rock. There's no way I can die. And so then it just became physical only, and I no longer feared falling. I never had that exhilaration that just drove me up to overcome it. And so rock climbing became boring. It was no longer a thrill sport. So that happened. People will hate you because you'll be able to argue in a calm manner. Well, everyone else gets emotional and angry and stuff like that. And so you see like people with like Trump derangement syndrome or the pro-Trumpers, really emotional over politics and things like that. I can just have like a debate or a conversation without really getting emotional. Um, that's kind of how that works now, and so a lot of people will hate you for that. Uh, you'll if you finish it and you get rid of your anxiety, you're gonna want to share it with other people, and those people may or may not want to get rid of their anxiety because a lot of people are adopting these things as their personal identity, and you will hear the most evil vitriol out of people attacking you who you knew had anxiety, knew had depression, and they would just throw vitriol at you because you're like taking away their Munchausen syndrome or whatever. I don't know what it is. It's crazy. It's a mental illness. Uh, so be prepared for that. It does definitely change your life, and so be prepared to have your life change. I think for the better. You can just go through life now without having any kind of anxiety like other people have, and it's an interesting concept. It's very simple, very affordable. I'm not going to go over the 9 pillars. Now I'm not going to start to steal his content or to do any kind of infringement like that. I am not hired by Charles Linden or the Linden Method Society or whatever. It's based in England. I do know they have some hospitals over there, like rehab centers that imply this, and it does work. I'm living proof of it. The man who shared it with me saved my life. I would be dead without the Linden Method. I'm guarantee it by now. I was very close, multiple occasions back then, and now I've been in multiple countries. I've experienced a lot of different things since then. And I did this while I was still a Jehovah's Witness, so I was still in the cult, and I limited my anxiety, and then you know, in there. And so, but I see a lot of people in the XJW community on Reddit or in the Facebook groups, and they're just tripping all the time. They look real anxious. I mean, even some of the major apostates have serious anxiety issues, I think. And you can kind of tell different emotional problems they're still going with, even though they seem to be, you know, composed in a way. But once you've had extreme anxiety and then you cure it, you have all those abilities still. And so all those sensations of like knowing when a train or something's going to happen to you, those things are all still there. And you can just sense anxiety with other people like instantly, and it's kind of annoying in a way. It's like overcoming alcoholism and being around drunk people again. Well, anyways, so I'm living proof about the Linden Method. I highly recommend it. I will put it in the description below. Anybody dealing with anxiety problems, Linden Method. All right.